Hi everybody, and welcome to our weekly seminars here at the Ozarks Free Fishing Seminars, as a matter of fact. And I'm one of the co-hosts, John Paradney. Since 1993, I've been freelance writing for various national fishing magazines, and during that time I've already written 2 books. This one on Lake of the Ozarks, and it's $5 here at the seminar, 10 on my website. And it covers the lake from one dam to the other, fishing for bass, crappie, white bass, and catfish. The local experts are in here, and it's broken down into each section of the lake and how to fish it from spring, summer, winter, fall, the whole year. So, like I said, it covers all the local experts we have at the lake here, and also a section on our Farmer Bassmaster Classic champions who fish here as well. My other book is 101 Bass Fishing Tips, and this one is through a publisher, but you can also buy it online or here at the seminar for $12. Or you can get both books from my website, www.jnoutdoors.com. This book is a compilation, you have trouble with that word all the time, of all of my articles through the years in 300-word tips, 101 tips actually, and it ranges various topics from how to tie knots to different seasonal patterns and stuff, and it includes all the tips from the top pros like Kevin Van Dam, Greg Hackney, Edwin Evers, and all those guys. So look that one up too. And I used to do these seminars for St. Louis County Parks, and they discontinued the program, so I decided to, well, let's see if we can do something down here. So I got a hold of Bass and Bob, and he's got all the local experts now corralled in his group. So I said he'd be perfect for starting this up, so I'm going to let Bass and Bob take over.
John, thanks, buddy. I'm so glad you contacted me a few years ago. Get these books, guys. You can get them not only on J&N Outdoors, or I think this one on Amazon.
Yeah, it's at different bookstores too.
These books are awesome. I use them as reference guides. They're also available on bassandbob.com. John, I appreciate. I can't thank you enough for reaching out to me a few years ago to do this seminar series, because it's been fantastic for our Bass and Bob members. We have 18,000 Bass and Bob members from everywhere, from Iowa to Chicago to Nebraska to Missouri, and these seminars become not only applicable to Lake of the Ozarks, which we talk about a lot here, but applicable to lakes all over the United States. So thank you, John, for that.
You're welcome.
And yeah, we have had some of the best anglers in the country here on the seminar series. Dion Hibden, we've had Marcus Sikora, Dennis Beerhorse, Roger Fitzpatrick, many others. We've had Coach here. We've had Big Ed, Terry Blankenship is here tonight, and we'll talk a little bit about fishing tonight, but this is like one of those really what I'll call special seminars. We have the Missouri Department of Conservation Fisheries Biologist Samantha Holcomb here with us tonight. As many of you may remember, we've had Greg Stoner in the past, and always great insight as it relates to the biology of Lake of the Ozarks, kind of what's going on, what's the health of our lake here at Lake of the Ozarks. And Samantha has been in this position now for a year and a half, 2 years?
Year and a half, about, yes.
About a year and a half. And so Samantha, I will toss you questions from behind the camera here.
Okay.
But we appreciate you so much investing your time to come here, because I know you're very busy with what you do, taking care of these fisheries. Tell us a little bit about let's start off with a little bit about your background, what it is that a fisheries biologist, what is your job, what are your responsibilities, and what lakes in the area do you work with? So tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay.
and so forth.
Alrighty. I'm Samantha Holcomb. I'm the Fisheries Management Biologist at the Camdenton office for the Missouri Department of Conservation. I started in this position in March of 2020. Prior to that, I actually still worked in the Camdenton office, starting in 2018 actually, for the science branch, and I did various projects associated with hydropower facilities in the state. So I got some experience both on the lake and riverside doing that job. I also got to work closely with the previous management biologist, who many know, Greg Stoner. So that was a great experience as well. I've worked for the department overall for 6 years now, so yeah, happy to be in this position and meeting new people all the time.
So what is the role of the fisheries biologist for Missouri Department of Conservation as it relates to, Lake of the Ozarks or other lakes? What is your role? What does that mean?
Yeah, so my role is primarily, and this is kind of the overall objective, is to manage both the put and take fisheries, so thinking about the fish species that we stock like paddlefish and walleye, as well as sustainable fisheries for the fish that do spawn naturally. So in Lake of the Ozarks, I do a lot of fish sampling to check the health of the population. Bass sampling usually occurs in the springtime at night, and we do electrofishing for the bass. The reason we do it at night, can't see it coming, they're up on the banks, and then for crappie in the fall in October we use big what are called trap nets, and they're metal frame nets, and that's what we use to assess. And basically, instead of getting a number, we don't have a number estimate of how many fish there are on the lake, but we can go back to 2020 from the 2021 data and say, is this better, is this worse, how does the population look compared to previous years? And that's how we assess how the fishery is doing. In addition to that, I do some other things that people might not expect. I do a lot of habitat management for Lake of the Ozarks, as well as like investigating fish kills in the area, not just at Lake of the Ozarks. My biggest, I guess, celebrity water body is Lake of the Ozarks, but I do help manage some rivers and streams in the area, such as the Osage River below Bagnell Dam, the Niagara River above Lake of the Ozarks, as well as smaller streams in the area, and then conservation area water bodies. So small ponds on Larry Gale access and at Saline Valley.
And you also manage Lake Niagara, right?
Yes, I do manage Lake Niagara actually, yes. Not many people know about that lake because in this area, Lake of the Ozarks is kind of the popular one, but Lake Niagara also is in my management zone. Yep.
And so, tell us a little bit more about how you study bass population, how you study crappie population. Feel free to sit down.
Yeah. Okay.
When you're doing that assessment, what is the process that you use for, doing your sampling? And then what data are you capturing when you're doing that? And then how do you write that down or actually, document that?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. So for bass sampling, it sounds pretty simple. You go out, you put an electrical current in the water that stuns the fish. The fish come, you net them, and then we take length measurements primarily on those fish and then throw them back. So what we do with those length measurements then is chart it. So how many fish do we have at 3 inches, at 4, 5, 6, and so on. And then once you see this graph kind of nicely laid out, you can kind of see the age classes. So you see your one fish kind of our block here, and then there's a small gap where there's not very many fish. And then another age class where you see another sort of big grouping. And then you can kind of see, how large is each age class compared to what it was last year or the year before. And you can kind of predict then with that data what in, let's say, 2 or 3 years for bass, what the population will look like if those bass keep growing to be healthy sizes and grow kind of at the same rate that they've been growing. So for example, with crappie data this last year, we kind of noticed in 2019 when we were doing our trap netting that there was quite a few more basically age 0 or young of year. Those would be the fish that were spawned in 2019. So those baby fish hardly ever show up in trap nets, and because we got a lot of them in 2019, we kind of saw that maybe there was going to be a large year class that year. And then in 2020, confirmed that. So there is a very large group of crappie right now that are in that 7 to 9 inch range, a lot more than normal. So, for example, I can say, yeah, right.
Terry's like,
Yeah, so I think in 2022 we're going to see some really great crappie fishing. I think a lot of those 7 to 9 inch fish some of them are already going to be above that 9 inch limit. But next year we're going to see the majority of those fish reaching legal size. So that's really exciting. And then when I get that intel from these sampling efforts, I can then go out and write my fishing prospects, and so I can give people what to expect when they go out.
Got it. And Samantha, as it relates to the crappie and what you found in 2019 and kind of what you're projecting, is there anything that you can assess as it relates to the water clarity, the bait fish, the conditions that created such a good spawn? Is there anything that you can assess to why that might have been a great year class versus another year class maybe not being so great?
Yeah, so 2019, some locals will probably remember it was a really wet year, and even though Lake of the Ozarks is maintained within a narrow window of, elevation,
Right.
The Niagara River and the Little Niagara River and the Gravois and the wet glades, those creeks and rivers are all flooding and bringing down all that nutrients from those floods. So even though Lake of the Ozarks doesn't necessarily get affected by a flood like that, we still do benefit in that we get all those extra nutrients that invertebrates at the bottom of the food chain can then use and sew up the chain, basically. And I think that's probably at least part of the reason we saw such a good year class for 2019.
Now, does that food chain then move throughout the lake, or is that something that, like you mentioned, we had these great rains, we had these floods, we had these nutrients, and that seemed to have affected some of the river areas? I'm guessing because throughout the lake we have a lot of creeks and stuff like that. Do those same conditions impact the lower end of the lake and other areas of the lake as well?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of fish that do spawn in the spring will do better in high water years. So I would think that some of that will be seen in other species as well. The crappie tend to be cyclical in that there's a really great year class and then maybe an average or below average year class. So it's a lot more dramatic than maybe some of the other species.
And that dramatic change, do you feel like has to do with whether we have high water or floods, or not floods, but high water conditions, or what determines that fluctuation?
There's a lot. It's hard to pinpoint any one factor. I kind of point to the flood year just because that's kind of one of the easy things to point out. Another thing is that small crappie are prey for other fish as well as larger crappie. So sometimes you'll see, that alternating pattern of good year class and then poor year class because they're getting cannibalized by maybe other crappie or other fish in general.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of things can affect fish spawn. It can be, the temperature, it can be the weather, water clarity, how stable the water is. There's almost too many things to even name that can affect a crappie spawn. So it's easy to point to a high water year being maybe the big reason why we had such a good one in 2019, but there's probably more factors to that I couldn't point out.
Got it. And so how about the bass? So we'll come back to the crappie here in a minute. So your sampling as it relates to bass, is it substantially similar to what you found with crappie?
So for bass, it takes a few more years for them to reach legal size. And I hadn't specifically looked at 2019. It didn't stand out as being remarkable. I do know that. 2020 and 2021 were pretty similar as far as crappie or as far as bass numbers went. I did see in 2021, so this year we had a larger proportion of the bass were 15 inches or greater. So last year when I did my sampling in the springtime, about 20% or a little less even of those bass were 15 inches or greater. Whereas this year about 25% of those bass were 15 inches or greater. So seeing a shift with larger fish, which may mean that somewhere in there, there's a year class that maybe either was a little smaller or the year class that is the 15-inch or greater may have been larger.
What? Go ahead, Ed.
No, I just wondered, do you have any kind of an idea, starting from the age group, what size they should be and how long does a bass live?
Bass can live 8 to 10 years. I mean, that's how long it takes for them to get to be good sized. But beyond that,
It's kind of a stump.
yeah, and I haven't done any bass aging recently, so I don't know what, like the maximum age would be for like the Ozarks and bass. Yeah. But for like the year classes, so when I sample in springtime, those 3 to 6 inch bass, those are last year's bass.
Right.
Those were spawned last year, and then from there you can kind of see 7 to 9 inches. Those were 2 years ago, and then from there it starts to get a little bit muddier because
You don't know.
some bass have slower growth rates than others.
Okay, then another question would be is, right now it seems to me that we're down on big bass. Kind of in a loophole of that 5 to 7 pound group. And I asked another conservation guy this one time, and I asked him, when I first moved down here, heck, I was catching big ones all the time. And all of a sudden it went down to a big downturn. Are we on a downturn that's going to come back up? With size of fish? Because it does seem like we're there. There's not as many big bass brought into tournaments anywhere. But it would be, does it downturn and upturn and downturn and upturn?
Yeah.
I'm just not seeing the big fish that I used to see. And I used to catch, I never was great, but did okay. But
You're getting smarter.
that's okay. Now, I worry about that. That is true. And is there things you can
Because
do?
they're all down to DB2.
Yeah, there you go. But, it just seems like we're on a kind of a downturn, and I didn't know if we're scheduled for that, or will that rise back up? How many years did it take? Because there was places you could go and catch, just you'd catch good ones, and they're not there right now. And
Yeah.
I just wonder what's up.
Yeah, I think especially since we have such a large group of fish right now, a large proportion of fish, I should say, that are.
Numbers a good keeper size, but we don't have bigger size
Yeah.
fish.
So it's probable that some of those fish will obtain really large size. Especially if people continue to do
Catch
best
and
management
release. Do their
practices
thing.
for catch and release and tournament fishing and all that. I don't get the fortunate opportunity to get very many 6 to 7 pound bass in my sampling boat very often. So unfortunately, I don't have a good yearly trend on those really large fish.
Yeah, they were in here and it just kind of disappeared, especially for me. Maybe not everybody, but for me. And it just doesn't seem I'm catching the quality of fish that I was. It seems like it's downturned, and hopefully it's coming back up. It's really nice to get tight, but I just wonder if it's a downturn that's being, noticed everywhere. I just noticed it myself. I don't see it on tournament weigh-ins at all myself. It's just not there.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Terry, you fish a lot of tournaments. Several of us here fish tournaments. I mean, I see 5 pounders, 6 pounders, a few 7 pounders. Over the 8 years I've been here, it hasn't seemed to have changed significantly to me.
What it has to be.
But that's a different deal. Terry, what about you? Have you seen?
Last year was a real struggle to catch quality fish, period, seemed like. There was a lot of times I've seen tournaments where there's very few limits brought in even. But this year, it's like a lot of us thought that maybe they were using a fish kill on some of the bigger fish. And, you know, I wasn't sure if it was a fish kill or if they just got so much food, which they have. They got shad. It seems like there's been major hatches to me. But this year, there's a lot of 4-pound fish caught, a lot. I mean, you're seeing a lot of 4-pound be caught up to in the mid-5s, not very many over 6. This time of year, it's a little tougher to see that, but over the years, I mean, I've seen it where I think, well, we're never gonna have that fishery again, you know, where we had those big stringers. And then all of a sudden, boom, here comes another year of it. And I think it is that class of fish that just has matured and made it through, you know, that's been a good hatch. And so, to me, right now, it's really on an upswing, what I'm seeing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
but he fishes a different area mostly than I do, so when you ask that question.
So what area do you fish and what area does he fish?
Blaze, T and Terrace. I will fish to the dam, but that's not normal water for me. And so I know that
I'm
Big
always
Ed's
in the
in
dam.
that area. And so it may be the area, but you can also watch the big bass bash and watch where the big fish are weighed in, and they're weighed in and down on that end of the lake.
Right.
Yeah.
And so,
I personally think that's because more people fish that area, because there's more residential.
yeah.
And yeah, it's bigger water, so
Not
that,
much habitat put
put,
in either.
No.
put a whole bunch, you know, put 40% of the, 40% of the anglers fishing one area of the lake, Gravois, Alhana, to the dam, and have as much big water. I assess that to that, but maybe I'm wrong. What do you think? What do you think?
Whenever they had the big bass bash this year, you know, we still hadn't seen very good stringers of fish. And if I'm probably not right on my number here, but I thought it took like a 5 1/4 pound average just to get checked.
Yeah,
Big bass.
it did, which is
And we're
great.
talking
Yeah,
about how many people every 2 hours weighed in?
yeah.
And how many paychecks they paid out? Was it, what, 30?
But don't you think if 40% of the field fish from the toll bridge to the dam, isn't it likely that you're gonna have more fish weighed in that
Yeah,
area?
it was kind of embarrassing to me because I've been catching them kind of fish, and these guys that are coming in are supposed to be more your amateur fishermen.
Yeah.
And they just caught the heck out of them, so maybe it's different tactics. I don't know.
You and Ed are taking too many people on guide trips.
I don't
I've seen more fish this year for 6 weeks, say 5 to 6 weeks, I could go out and catch 40 and 50 bass a day. It was every day. And I was catching them like crazy. I had a good little secret spot until somebody put it on TV. But, yeah, thank you, Alfred Chapman. But, it was unbelievable. And then, well, they shut the river down. When the river went down, that went down. So
Yeah,
the river has everything to do with it in this lake. If you don't have the river going, it's tough to catch fish, so.
Big Ed, so based on your initial question,
I'm
and
just not seeing
and you've been fishing this lake for so many years.
I had spots
As a
that you go-
tournament fisherman,
Yeah, I
fishing
did-
all over the lake, what
I
is,
had-
what is your assessment of that?
I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I mean, I used to have spots that you want to go catch a 5-pounder, let's get in a boat and go catch him. We can do it. And it's just not there.
I agree
And-
with you.
Huh?
Lately, that upper end, it's good, there's big fish there, but I think there's less and less because they're getting relocated to BB2.
No.
Whatever it takes.
Really?
Something.
Yeah.
That
And
many?
they don't swim that far back.
How
Right?
many?
Well, a lot of big
considering
fish
most
do
of the
because
most of the tournaments are out of there.
You know, they take them out of the coves and they take them to PB2 or Kaufman Beach
Yeah.
or.
Is our fishery that unhealthy that X number of tournaments times X number of big fish are really gonna change
It's been
where
studied.
the big fish are?
Yeah. They get relocated. There's been studies that have shown those fish do not go 20 miles.
Yeah.
What does the young lady have to say?
Oh, let me ask her. So anyway, that's a great discussion. Appreciate everybody's input.
So I wondered because I don't catch them, that's it.
What are your thoughts about that, Samantha, in terms of we do have 537 tournaments this past year on Lake of the Ozarks. That's a lot of tournaments. 50% of them or so take out a PB2. The anglers travel all over the lake. They have a 5-fish limit. Okay, so half of them So 250 anglers out of boats out of PB2, 5 fish limit, whatever the math is on that. And if they catch them all on the lower end of the dam and move them back to PB2, is relocation of bass a problem?
Generally, bass don't move that far. They really kind of stay put within, less than a mile, maybe 2. But if you think about all those bass getting released there's not enough room in that ecosystem for that many bass. Some of them will ultimately have to move farther distances. But that raises a valid point that we don't really know how far those bass move. It hasn't been studied on Lake of the Ozarks.
Can we do that?
And maybe in the future we could do something like that. Yeah.
In Texas, Lake Fork, they've done it in different lakes. They tagged the fish and had transmitters on it.
Was there a scientific purpose for that?
Yeah, to see how far fish would go after they've been released.
But why is that scientific?
Why isn't it?
Well, Shelbyville Lake did it one time, and they tagged several fish, and they didn't move over 3 miles in a year.
Yeah.
They stayed in that area. That was one that I read.
That's research. That is scientific. Scientific research is scientific.
I just don't. I think it might be my skill level's gone down. I don't know.
I'm sure that's not true, Big Ed.
Yes, I give it up and start playing basketball, and I can't do that. So.
Basically, there's a lot more
If there
pressure on
becomes,
these lakes.
like a scientific need for, looking into this, based on, if the population does become really poor.
Is there a mortality aspect to it?
Oh, that as well. Generally you can keep the mortality pretty low, again, using best management practices for tournament fishing and catch and release in general. But yeah, if there becomes a need, if the fishery in one arm becomes poor enough that we really need to know why, it's such a different picture in one place than it is in another, because really each arm of the lake is different, do have different populations, and that would happen naturally, again, just because bass don't move very far. But yeah, I imagine that if we see that become, a really obvious thing at some point, if we see, one arm of the lake or another arm of the lake looking significantly different, then that could be something that warrants more information.
Right, got it.
I got a question on fish care.
So Coach here, Coach, you're a guide, and I think you're a boat official for Major League Fishing, I think, right?
Right, yes. My question is this, fish care in tournaments, to me, catch and releases, that's my deal. I like that a lot. But I catch 5, I haul them around all day in my boat. I come in, we weigh them, we turn them loose at PB2.
Summertime, wintertime, what time of year?
This is a general, summertime's gonna be tougher than wintertime, obviously. But we also have release boats. So we've hauled around in our boat all day. We take them and put them in a release boat. What's your feelings? Is that a good thing? Is that, with the release boat goes out, who knows where they go? I'm sure somebody knows, but
They don't go very far.
they don't might not. Is that a good thing? Or handle them one more time? Is that a bad thing? I don't know.
I honestly, I really don't know the answer to that question. I do know a lot of tournament organizers are up to date on the research on what's, again, best management practices
Right.
for handling and releasing those fish. So I don't actually know the answer to that question. I can certainly look into it.
Sure.
Yeah.
What's the best practices in June? I've got 5 fish in my live well. What's the best practice? What maybe you can touch on, maybe things we're not doing that we should do to ensure a higher rate of release live fish?
Yeah, I'm not a tournament angler, so I'm not probably the best person to ask that. But just generally making sure those fish stay cool, and those live wells can get pretty hot if you're not changing the water regularly.
Putting ice.
And putting ice in it. So yeah, I think probably that's your biggest thing, is making sure that there's plenty of oxygen in the water and keeping it cool. I do know that the Keeping Bass Alive publication, that's a thing to look at, just because I'm not an expert on tournament fishing.
We're gonna write that down.
Yeah.
I just asked him to
Keeping
write that
bass
down.
on, what, keeping
Yeah,
bass
it's
alive?
called, so I
No,
actually
I'm
have some physical copies.
Say
of
right
it.
now. Keep building.
Yeah, it's, this is the PDF of it.
Okay,
Just
I
print
think
it
that's
off.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I really just
We can get
recommend
a-
people look at this. and
Get
see
you a
that-
copy of that, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, the PDF is free online.
Yeah, it's
kind of
online.
thick. I probably shouldn't have printed the whole thing, but here I did.
We'll take a look at it and
Yeah.
publish it.
Yeah,
I
there
think
you
it'd be
go.
awesome.
Good.
The more education you get on keeping bass alive is going to help everybody out in the long run. You know, I'm strictly catch and release. As soon as you catch them, they're back in the water. I don't keep anything in the boat anytime. I don't like getting my live wells dirty. But bottom line is it's back in, back out. So I just, I always wondered why it seemed like I'm not catching a big one. So
You're not the only one.
yeah.
That
They're
little,
not that great of a fisherman.
Do you feel like, Big Ed, do you feel like anybody is?
Not really. No.
So you feel like this is kind of across the lake?
Yeah, I see that. I look at tournament weights a lot of times, you know, throughout the season and see
Yeah.
what guys are catching. And we used to have lots of 20, well, I know 4 fish limits, a whole different gig than 5 fish limits, and that's what we're doing to help preserve the fish right now, which is wonderful, okay? But used to see 23 pounds a lot of times here, a lot of times 24 and 25 pounds at 5 pound, you know, average. That's a pretty good gig, and I'm just not seeing them now.
they're doing it at night tournaments right now.
Night, are they? Well, see, I missed out on a lot of that stuff, but I guess my education should be better to qualify myself, but it just doesn't seem like, I know that I'm not catching the big bass like I used to.
Right.
And it's struggled, you know, it drives me nuts.
I have clients ask me all the time, that little fellow that spawned this spring,
Yeah.
just past spawn, when will he be a 15-inch fish if everything is
That was my
copacetic?
original question. Exactly.
You know,
Good.
if everything is pretty stable and the food sources are stable, how long does it take him to get to that 15-inch size?
Good question. That was gonna be my
Yeah.
next question.
Yeah, I should have printed off my chart here. I have a growth rate chart, and I don't want to tell anybody the wrong thing. But
Ballpark it.
You don't have a pen. You're
more than 5, yeah,
Pound.
more than 5 years probably.
Really?
Yeah,
following.
Really?
at least more than 4. Yeah, for sure. Once you're talking about 15 inches, that's unless they're growing extremely fast.
Right.
Yeah. I can get you that information.
Yeah, we'll do it. I mean, I got,
I do have a graph
Steve
that
here-
has that information on it readily available in my inbox. I just didn't bring it.
Steve's gonna write that down
So
for
what you're
growth
saying
rate
is
chart.
that a 15-inch fish
you want me
takes
to-
4 to 5 years to grow to that size.
I think more than that, but yeah, at
Okay,
least.
so let's say 5 to 6. And then you said that the estimation of a bass is about 8 years. So are they only gonna stay in that 15 to whatever for 2 years? Or is there a whole group of fish that are, better than that are gonna grow to 10 years? Or how does
When
that
I said the 8 to 10 years, I meant that's generally how long it takes to catch
Right.
what you're calling a trophy size bass. They can live a lot longer than 8 to 10 years, but that's what generally is your timeline looking for, when you're looking at, 20 plus inch bass.
Is there a way to tell how old the bass is?
Rings.
Yeah, so
They pull something out of their ear.
Yeah.
So, when we do age fish, basically, you have to crack open their skull and look for their ear bones. And their ear bones, they grow like trees, so they have rings for each year that they grow, because they
You're
have
not gonna know.
a
from
distinct
catching.
growing season, basically.
Yeah, but
So you count the rings, and then you can tell how old that fish is pretty accurately. You can also do it with scale counts and then catfish spine counts, but those are not as accurate as pulling out those ear bones and actually counting the rings on those.
Would we be better? Sorry, Bob.
No,
Would-
you
would
run,
we-
you go, bud.
Would we be better off if we had more nutrients in this lake, as in some weeds and different things? And why won't they grow here? Does anybody got an idea?
So we don't have very much vegetation for a few reasons. One of the big reasons is that you know, we have a consistent drawdown over the winter. There's a lot of wave action on the lake, carp, you know. We have just a bunch of different factors that kind of go into not being able to establish vegetation in the lake. So
Okay.
our best bet for habitat then is brush piles, like large cedar trees.
And is
They
that,
put those in here?
kind of just to follow up on that, for the team, for the group here and for members, is that the primary factor that keeps us from, I mean, we do catch 4, 5, 6, 7 pound bass on this lake.
Oh, no doubt about it. I-
Even,
almost a 9.
even though, and I know you guys, everybody here has caught them. But on regular frequency, like maybe a Texas lake or an Oklahoma lake or a Florida lake, which I know some of those introduce different strains of bass. What are the limiting factors for Lake of the Ozarks to more consistently catch, to have trophy bass in that 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pound category?
Yeah, I guess the limiting factors are just that it's a natural system and there's a lot of variability in the prey and what the cover is like, what the water quality is like.
So habitat
Even in-
or vegetation may be one, I guess.
Also,
Yeah, and-
slow
and that could be a
slower,
thing.
growing season too. Slow,
Cold,
not as
Shorter.
long as growing
cold
season.
water.
Right.
Have-
Yeah, so the north southern you go in the United States, the longer the growing season is. So we're never gonna have bass like they do in Texas or Florida.
Right.
But, you know, even just consistently getting those really large bass, in such a large variable, you know, system is,
Got
it's just, there's, I think, too many factors to say any one of these would make it more consistent.
right. And so, Samantha, as you've done your sampling in 2019 and 2020, not sure if you've had a chance to compile much of this in terms of the overall health of the bass population on Lake of the Ozarks, similar to what you described in terms of crappie. How do you feel about it?
It looks pretty stable. The big thing to look for is there's no missing classes of fish. So there's no big jumps from, you know, there's a bunch of 4 and 5, 6 inch fish, and then there's nothing until you get to 10 inches. So I'm not seeing that, so that's really good. That means, you know, that we'll have consistently, we'll consistently see, I guess, bass reaching that legal size every year. So that's the biggest thing to look for me.
So no red flags.
No red flags. I don't see any red flags in the data, no. So yeah, that's good. As far as whether it's growing or decreasing, it's looking pretty stable to what it was last year. And I haven't looked at 2019 in too long to know what it looked like
Cool.
2 years ago. But
When I worked with Greg on stories for Missouri Game and Fish, we called it a broken record. Because every year the classes are about the same.
yeah, yeah, the bass is much
So no more,
consistent.
no broken records.
We're good. We're good. I mean, it's broken record as far as it just kept repeating itself as far as the classes go. They're the same every year, good classes.
So if you say that vegetation is one of the key factors to growing bass and crappie and all of the
Big ones.
fish,
Big ones.
well, you gotta have good vegetation to start and to keep on going.
We don't have
Is
vegetation.
there any
We had it.
programs that the conservation is talking about, either putting in brush piles or putting in additional vegetation into the lake to grow those fish?
And will that have any impact?
I know Greg had talked about some planting of shoreline weeds. I don't know if he still was going to do that or not.
It would be very difficult to establish aquatic plants in the lake. So I'm not actively looking to do any of that. But as far as brush piles go, yeah, there's like new brush piles put in the lake all the time. Part of Ameren's shoreline management plan is to put in brush piles as a mitigation effort for when there's like large docks or there's sediment removal or anything that could be considered a loss of fish habitat. Then More cedar trees usually go back into the lake to kind of replace that lost habitat that might have been there with docks. But I mean, even when you're thinking about 20 foot deep below a dock, you know, you don't know that there's brush piles there anyway, so adding that is just, you know, doing more good. But yeah, on top of them requiring brush piles for certain activities, I also will be putting in some brush piles this winter, weather permitting. I didn't get to it before the lake froze last year, but let's hope this year will be a little bit better.
And what is your objective with doing that?
They're really just to be good fishing opportunities, more so than anything. The more habitat you have for fish, the better, obviously, but as far as 1 to 2 brush piles here and there go, I don't know that that individually makes that much of a difference, except for providing a good place for anglers to try to catch those fish.
It's not something that's gonna like make our fishery explode, like Steve was saying, with bigger fish, because there's more.
Yeah, but I mean, even with like cedar trees, because they're natural, you're gonna get some of those invertebrates and stuff on those cedar trees too, which is why that's better than maybe those man-made crappie beds that you can buy online. So those
Right.
cedars, they can hold more of some forage for fish and, you know, algae for the forage for fish. So you're seeing more of a food chain on that. So it will benefit the fish,
Right.
but it may not make a population of crappie explode, for example.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Is it against the law, or is it okay by Ameren and you guys to put brush piles in?
So actually, you would have to go ask Ameren.
That's a great question.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to put brush piles in, basically, what you'll need to do is you'll need to call Ameren and seek permission from them.
And would that be Greg Stoner of Shoreline Management?
Yeah, you could call him. I think you can really just call probably the main line, and they can forward you to either the appropriate person or answer that for you.
I always wondered that, because people say, you know,
Terry, did you hear that?
I heard that.
I have people, I've been out there sinking brush piles before, and I've had people say, no, you can't do that, I'm gonna call Ameren. I said, well, let me give you the phone number of the guy to call.
yeah, you know.
I got a question about your electric fishing. Percentage-wise, largemouth, spot, smallmouth.
I've never
Part
seen.
of my question
Yeah.
is, why don't we have smallmouth? Because Table Rock, Stockton, loaded with smallmouth. That's part of my question, but what percentage breakdowns, if, I'm sure you probably don't have that right on top of your head, but, I'm sure largemouth's the largest class, and then spots are probably.
Yeah, I think, now this is a rough estimate, but
Yeah.
roughly largemouth are 85%, spots 15% roughly.
Really?
So, and that was just this last year, and that can change over time. For smallmouth, the reason we don't see them, I think, is primarily due to the water clarity. Lake of the Ozarks can get clear-ish, but it's never gonna be Table Rock clear. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. Why go into Lake of the Ozarks from, let's say, like the Little Niagara River or the Niagara River, if they've got pretty sweet spot to make their home
I can take
right
that.
where they're at, you know? And
I
I
always
think,
heard it was gravel.
Yeah, and that could be
Greg,
too.
Greg told me that, we talked about that before. We don't have the long gravel points that Table Rock has.
yeah.
The real long spawning points.
When I interviewed when I first met Samantha, she loves smallmouth fishing. That's that's her thing.
That's why I like Lake Niagara. I wish they hadn't said it.
Yeah. Samantha, I know that crawfish, I mean, the primary forage on Lake of the Ozarks is crawfish, and then gizzard shad, and what's the other shad? Threadfin.
Threadfin, but I don't
Right.
think we have.
We don't have thread.
We don't have a silver.
No, what are the small ones?
Silver side.
Yeah, we have silver sides or
Yeah.
just a variety of minnows too.
So, I don't know if you do any sampling of that, but what is your assessment in terms of the health of the populations of our bait fish as well as our crawdads? And what do you assess for the health or not health, or what are the things that we should be watching for that could affect that?
You know, I don't do any sampling right now for any of the bait fish. Generally, bait fish, you know, like minnows and shad, do really well. You know, if one species isn't doing well in a particular year, there's still plenty of other forage. So I don't really assess the bait fish or the crawfish populations in the lake, but certainly if that's something that people think that they are seeing less of, to let me know, and I can certainly try to fit it in somewhere.
It feels pretty healthy to me. I'm just
Yeah.
curious if anybody.
No.
One thing, oh, go ahead, sorry.
What about invasive species in the lake? Do we have
Russ,
invasive
thanks.
species in the lake?
Yeah, so that's honestly probably my biggest concern for Lake of the Ozarks is always going to be keeping invasive species out of the lake. We do have zebra mussels. We do not have the densities that other lakes are seeing, which is excellent. I'd like to keep the densities of zebra mussels as low as possible. And the biggest thing for that is getting the word out for people to clean, drain, dump or clean, drain, dry, sorry, and don't dump bait. That's what I was getting at. Yeah, to prevent the spread of more zebra mussels. So even though they're here, we want to prevent the spread. So even, you know, if you're taking your boat out and putting it across the lake somewhere, it's still a good idea to go ahead and do that, because there may be zebra mussels at the dock you're currently using, but way down the lake there isn't any zebra mussels there yet. And then I kind of want to show off. I've got some signs at my office, so if there's like any marina or dock owners or
We need to take them to the,
HOAs that
we need to
would
put
like
them
some of
in
these,
the-
I've got plenty to give away for people.
we need to take those to the bait shop.
Yeah.
Speaking of signs, I talked to Brian Canaday
Good.
about this one time. I was down below the dam. And
Yeah.
These guys are trapping Asian carp, and they're using this catfish bait up on the lake. And I asked them, "Are you gonna kill those first?" And they said, "Oh yeah." But the problem is they've got a sign up above, up by the dam, and or the or the viewing area, the difference between an Asian carp and regular carp and that. But there needs to be one down close to the river.
Yeah.
Where they're actually trapping that, because I don't think those guys
They-
know the
they
difference.
do it
When they're
all
that
the
little,
time.
they don't know the difference.
Yeah, and that's something, I can look into
I
posting
put
some
100
additional
signs up
signage down
there.
there
Yeah.
at our Bagnell access,
Yeah.
for sure.
How close are they to us, the river?
Yeah, right below the
Oh,
dam,
yeah. Oh, yeah, they're
there's
jumping all
Asian
over.
carp, silver carp specifically,
Silver
yeah.
carp,
So those are the ones that are the most dangerous, because of course they jump out of the water, and they do reproduce in our waterways. So those are the ones that are by far, the biggest concern, keeping those out of the lake. So people not transporting live bait, live carp specifically, and leaving those things.
Samantha, we have about maybe a few more minutes left. Let me ask you a couple more questions,
Okay.
and obviously open it up to anybody. This has been a great discussion. Appreciate everybody's input. Other than maybe the Asian carp thing, are there any concerns that you have as it relates to the health of the Lake of the Ozarks fishery?
I'm not seeing any red flags. Of course, we do have natural diseases that run through populations. So occasionally we do see like a small population of fish that might have obvious signs of disease, or even a small fish kill. But generally those are small, isolated incidents, and they tend to occur in the early, it seems like a lot of times they occur, post-spawn, because the fish are under a lot of stress. But again, that's normal. In a natural system, every so often you will get that kind of thing happen. But as far as it being concerning, it's not concerning at this point.
Cool. As it relates to a 90 miles of a lake and 1,000 miles of shoreline, from Truman Dam to Bagnell Dam and everything in between, are there any things that you're seeing or finding, or as a biologist and angler, that you feel like any one particular area of the lake is better to fish than any other angler, any other area of the lake?
Well, everybody's got their favorite spots. It just depends on kind of what you're going for. Sometimes right below the dam, especially during, the migration of walleye, hybrid striped bass and striped bass, white bass. Sometimes that's the best place to fish. And then, other times in the heat of the summer, people like to head on down to the Niagara because it's cooler water, or the Glaze. Kind of just depends on what you're fishing for and what time of year it is, really.
Cool.
If you ask me, it's always a good day to go fishing in Missouri, but especially at Lake of the Ozarks. But yeah, I think there's no wrong or right answer to that question.
Cool.
How often do you stock walleye?
That's
And
how
how many?
that's going.
Yeah, so they're scheduled to be stocked basically every other year, 160,000 fry. You guys might not care about the number, so.
Yeah.
We do.
Okay, yeah.
I wanna know
Okay,
that.
great. Yeah, and then, so even though they're scheduled to be done every other year, frequently, Lake of the Ozarks does get surplus. You can never really do the exact number of fish at a hatchery that you need to stock, so there's usually surplus that gets to go in Lake of the Ozarks.
Where do they dump them?
Yeah,
No, really. I
Yeah.
mean, is it one spot? Is it up high or is it down low or do they go all over?
all over, yeah. I usually switch it up each year, as did
By the
Greg.
dam's a good place.
So sometimes you get put in
Good
Warsaw. I usually try to put at least some of them in the Niagara, because it is a good place. They like to hang out in the Niagara in the summer, especially when it's really hot and the hot Tonka's right there.
It's amazing. I mean, we are catching them down by the dam frequently, not frequently, but from time to time. Yeah, but it's amazing how some of them get really big too.
Yeah, we got a really big one for the hatchery broodstock this year, so she hopefully will pass on her
How
big
big is
genetics.
Is it great big and you're gonna turn her loose on the lake?
Oh yeah. So actually, yeah, we do collect the walleye for Lost Valley Hatchery in Warsaw from Lake of the Ozarks, but once they're spawned, they get put right back in the lake.
Cool.
Do they alternate you stock hybrids the other year? You used to stock walleye one year, hybrids the next. Is that you still doing that or not?
Yeah, the lines kind of get blurred because I do get surplus for hybrids as well frequently. There's not very many lakes in the state that take striped bass and hybrid striped bass, so when there is surplus of those, I do frequently get those too for Lake of the Ozarks.
So,
I got a question. It's kind of a two-parter.
Okay.
Due to the huge, growth in numbers of the Asian carp on the river and in the lake, do you kind of encourage more guys to bow fish and get them out if they can, or what's your kind of preference on that?
Oh, yeah.
As far as Asian carp go?
Yeah, specifically if you're talking about silver carp, I'd encourage people to, angle for them and whatever legal methods they would like. And actually, if you give them a try, hear me out, I know they're bony.
Not bad
And
either.
not maybe
Oh,
your
I
favorite
like
thing to clean, but they do taste pretty good too. So I recommend people at least give it a shot once,
All right. Well, the second question, and I should have spoke up a lot sooner, talking about thickets, brush piles. I gotta ask, your preference. Would you encourage more people to just use strictly brush? Because I've noticed there's starting to be a huge growth in number of everybody putting these PVC beds out. I mean, in your preference area, what would be a better thing to use?
Yeah, I mean, my preference would be for people to use natural materials. So if they don't have access to hardwoods, cedars, but they do have access to hardwoods, that works too. Cedars are generally, the most recommended because they provide such complex cover, and then on top of that, they're natural, so you're gonna get the full food chain that can utilize that cover.
Terry Blankenship says, man, don't be sharing all that information. Terry drops a lot of, he drops a lot of beds and he uses a lot of cedars.
Do you call Tanner first?
Huh?
You call him?
Yeah, of course. But cedars has always seemed like a lot stronger territory to hold crappie. They are a prey species, so, they seem like if you get in those little small limbs and everything, they tend to be protected better, so I always felt like it was good, but it's good to drop some hardwood too, just to kind of open up for the bigger fish, maybe a bass or two.
Cedars last longer too.
So
Cedars last a long time.
I just want to follow on real quick and then ask you one final question. Open it up. So in terms of walleye, what do you feel would be the best area of the lake and best time of the year to catch walleye?
Well, I know a lot of people like to catch them, you know, on up into Warsaw on the upper end of the lake during their spring run, their spring migration. You can also catch them in like the Niagara River, for example, during their spring migration. So that's the most probably popular time from what I've seen anecdotally. You know, I haven't done actual, you know, hard science on this, run the numbers or anything, but
Right.
it does seem like that's the most popular time for people to fish for walleye.
Yep.
But if you can find a spring influence and a little bit of depth, even in the summertime you can catch them. I've been getting calls like crazy, people catching walleye right the last several weeks, so
Nice.
could be a good time to catch them right now.
Cool. And before I open it up to final questions, Samantha, what kind of what projects are on your plate over the next year plus? And what events do you have, you know, coming up that we should all be paying attention to as anglers here on Lake of the Ozarks?
So as far as what's on my plate for management of Lake of the Ozarks, right now I think my biggest priority is to kind of get that management plan updated. And then once that's done, that is made available to the public so the public can see.
What is a management plan? What does that look like? What does that entail?
So basically it kind of outlines what are the goals for the fishery. So what is our, you know, put some numbers on it. So what do we want to see when we do spring bass sampling? It kind of puts some numbers in there for, you know, what we want to see to consider it, you know, a healthy fishery. And then, you know, our stocking rates. So how many walleye, paddlefish, all that are we stocking each year? What are the habitat management goals, you know? So how often am I going to stock brush piles in the lake? That sort of thing. And because a lot of the regulations and, you know, management goals really have changed since the last time it was written, it's kind of a good time for me to update it here. With some of the paddlefish regulations potentially changing, as well as, you know, moving forward, looking into the catfish project as well. It has not been updated since the slot limit went into effect. So that's my top priority right now, and you know, getting some new brush piles established in the lake would be right up there as well this winter.
Cool. Okay.
Taking care of that.
How about the 10-inch crappie length limit change? Or change to the 10-inch?
Yeah, that's not exactly on my plate right now. I want people to keep sending your comments and questions about that to me. I'm happy to hear them. Right now it's still 9 inches, obviously, but moving forward, yeah, love to hear comments and stuff.
I know, I talked to Brian Kennedy about it. He said, well, we can't really put it on Facebook, but he asked me to put it on, and we got quite a bit of favorable response.
Yeah.
There's a few that didn't like it, but overall,
Yeah,
it's pretty favorable.
Cool.
love to hear everybody's comments on that, and yeah, see if
10-inch.
yeah, okay.
The majority of the guys, that's what they want. And 9-inch doesn't really have much on it anyway.
Some even
Might as
ask
well
10-inch, 10 fish.
Samantha, we've got 18,000 Lake of the Ozarks anglers on the other side of the camera. Are there any messages that you'd like to send from Missouri Department of Conservation as it relates to, you know, just talking to the anglers in general that fish this lake every year?
Yeah, I guess to appeal to everybody from beginners to experienced anglers like we have here, I'll give a plug for the Mo Fishing app. I actually really heavily use this app myself.
Nice.
It's really great to just have, you know, it's got the fishing prospects on there. So for Lake of the Ozarks, you can see what I wrote for 2020 fishing prospects right on the app. You can have your permits on there. You can search for water bodies and see what, you know, what their prospects are like, what amenities they have. So like if they have ADA docks, if they have bathrooms, if they have a boat ramp, you can see all that stuff on here. So I just wanted to give a plug to the app. I don't know how.
What's it called again?
It's called the Mo Fishing app. MO Fishing app. Yeah.
Mo Fishing
And-
app. .gov or?
Yeah. I got a lot of people get their
Just go to
license.
your app store and type in Mo Fishing, and it should be the first thing that comes up.
I think Bassing Bob would be the first thing that comes up, but I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, that's really a great app. I wanted to get that out there, and then if there are any beginner anglers that maybe don't have their own tackle, we do also have a rod and reel loaner program. Some local places to get it are at the Camdenton Public Library, and we do have fishing classes coming up in Tipton, Missouri. Actually, on September 7th and 9th, there's fishing that starts all the way at the beginning and goes to kind of intermediate sort of skills. So if you know anybody interested, send them to mdc.mo.gov/events, and they can get signed up for that too.
That's awesome.
Nutshell, maybe.
Any final questions from the group? Oh my God, what a great,
I got one.
go ahead, John. John always has one final
And
question.
I fish the river. How's the bass population down on this river?
Well, that's a secret. No, I'm just kidding.
It's not very good.
You know, just anecdotally, are you talking about the Niagara or the?
No, it's below the dam.
Below the dam.
Oh, okay. You know, I don't do much fishing on the Osage personally,
that's
but
good.
I've heard nothing but good things from other people. So yeah,
We're smallmouth.
Cool.
lots of spotted.
Any
bass
other
on
questions?
the Osage. Yeah.
Samantha, thank you so much, man. We appreciate you so much. Thank you.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me as well. Yeah.
She's going like this.